on that again, like I would say over the last 14, 15 years, I've developed a kind of a PhD in the Salesforce ecosystem. And I think one of the things that's a little bit unique about my experience is that instead of being really deep in the product or even really deep in a really narrow section of the product for a really long period of time, sort of did everything. So got started in the ecosystem. I responded to word of it a lie, a Craigslist ad for a CRM business analyst.
Right.
And that led me to be, the first full-time hire at a company called Vertibo, which was sort of one of the later surfers on the first set of waves around, Salesforce-specific SIs. So that would have been like the Blue Wolf, Superiors, Cloud Sherpas. Vertibo was kind of right at the sort of back half of that group.
Yeah.
So we built a Salesforce SI, right? And so what is the experience of doing something that's really targeted on this new set of tools? My comparison at that point was to Oracle, right? And I was blown away coming to work with Salesforce, because after 5 years of Oracle consulting, it's like you learn that the default answer is always no. And then you show up and work with the Salesforce ecosystem. It's like, no, yeah, we can totally do that. When do you want it? So that sort of opened up a whole bunch of doors in terms of what you can do with technology and how you engage with stakeholders and frankly, how you run an implementation project. Because if you're sort of default, we can totally do that. It's a really different approach to implementation than, nope, that's a terrible idea, we're not going to do that. So that was kind of my entry point into the ecosystem. Did everything there was to do in the platform. I did Service Cloud things. I did, custom app for public sector. I did, I helped companies build app exchange apps, kind of really, really wide experience. My last role at Vertibo was managing the field service practice there. We were a ServiceMax partner. And I remember at one point I went to our founders and I said, if you give me a mobile app and a dispatch console, if we go build those things, I think we can put ServiceMax out of business. We were a small SI. They were interested in being an SI. They weren't interested in building products. And so they're like, well, that's not really what we do. So I had a conversation with PwC and they said, yeah, sure, go do it. So we did that, did it for a large kind of office catering company, and turned that into an accelerator that we then started to co-market with Salesforce. So now I've evolved from, I'm an implementations guy, how do I run the best Salesforce implementation project that you can run, to how do I co-market and co-sell a product with Salesforce. That led into a whole bunch of interesting opportunities for me, which the sort of phase shift moment was in 2016 when I was invited to help them write the certification for the Salesforce field service product, and got connected with a whole bunch of people on the product team. And so that led to this sort of new chapter of, okay, now instead of sort of trying to create and prove a market opportunity with this accelerator thing that isn't really a product, but solve some problems, now there's a product. Now how do you help? At this point I was at Slalom, and so it was how do you enable a bunch of people to sell a product on the Salesforce platform that no one's ever heard of? And so that's a whole new set of challenges. And what is it like to work with their product team, and what is it like to go implement a product that's brand new, and you're doing this for really big companies who have really high expectations. And so what is the balance that you need to strike between implementation partner and sort of product management team and Salesforce account team and customer? And then over the last several, field service was sort of an interesting testing ground because it's really friggin' hard to do. It's also kind of just on the edge of Salesforce's wheelhouse, where it's mostly customer, but it's also a lot of operations, and it's a lot of finance, and it's a lot of things that are traditionally considered ERP. And so you see some interesting things out of those projects that you don't see when you're doing Sales Cloud. And that's really led me to where I am now, which is both of the projects that I'm kind of engaged with now, both Motor Unit AI and Sweep, are about how do you solve what is the fundamental problem of all technology projects, which is go live is the first day of the project, right? But no one approaches technology projects that way, because there's a whole bunch of reasons for it, but like, because we don't, because like it's build the thing, get the thing live. And once the thing is live, then like everything will be fine. So much of what I've seen about Salesforce specifically, but I really do think it applies to SaaS generally, is that, you know, go live is day zero. Go live is the point where the customer needs to start internalizing the fact that there's a new way of doing things, and everybody has things to learn, and everyone has feedback to provide, and there's adjustments that need to get made. And the more an organization is empowered to sort of own that feedback cycle and that improvement cycle, the better the outcomes are. And that is a universal truth, right? 100% of the time, companies that own that process get more out of SaaS platforms than companies that have to be fully dependent on someone else to manage it for them.
Yeah.
So I don't know, that's kind of my arc of experience with the Salesforce platform. And, you know, so where it leads me to now is sort of exploring things and sort of working with tools and products and platforms that help people really manage that. And sort of, I would describe the sort of the big impact that Salesforce had to business technology overall as closing the distance between the application and the business. Right. The amount of time between the business saying, hey, I have a crazy idea for doing something, and like, hey, we have a working prototype for that. Right. With Oracle, it was 2 years, like absolute fastest you could do it. Maybe 18 months if you were willing to sort of work your team half to death. With Salesforce, it was like 6 to 8 weeks. Right.
Yeah.
Now we're entering this crazy new paradigm where, you know, with AI and with just some of the development tools that enables, it's like 6 or 8 minutes, right? It's like, hey, I want to try something. And it's like, cool, here's a version. And so part of what I'm working on now is like, one, how do I help customers understand that that's a new way of doing things? I'll say help the ecosystem, right? It's SIs, it's Salesforce, it's customers. And then two, you know, trying to figure out how do you sort of make the best version of that possible.
Okay. So what do you, so obviously, what was the thinking behind starting Sweep and Motor Unit then? What, obviously you've talked about, you know, where you've got to. So tell me about those businesses.
Yeah. So Motor Unit I started was sort of, I don't know, 18 years into consulting, and really sort of wanted to like take a pause and take a step back and see if there wasn't a better way to do things. Happened to do it. I think I hung out that particular shingle, like, you know, 4 or 5 months before ChatGPT burst onto the scene.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, you know, it was like, okay, AI is starting to be a thing, and we all sort of think this could be useful. And then I was like, no, this is going to be not a thing, but like the thing. Sweep was actually founded by a couple of guys that came out of Wix. I found out about Sweep, no word of it a lie, through a LinkedIn ad. Saw a demo and was like, I need to be a part of this. And that was kind of how I found Sweep. And, you know, now I'm sort of one part of Angela.
So what made you look at that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, what made you look at Sweep then? Because I know what you mean. You see loads of those sort of things, and everyone says what a great product. And so what made you jump into that particularly?
Yeah, so back to my time at Vertibo, one of the things, one of our key insights in the early days of Vertibo was the kind of solution design process, you know, the kind of traditional waterfall. And I spent time at Accenture, so like the big like Accenture delivery methods approach to projects where like map the as is process, document the to be process, like now overlay system, right? It was like, listen, with Salesforce, the bottom line is if you tell me what you do, I'll tell you the right way to do it on Salesforce. Like we can, because I know Salesforce, you know your process. We can sort of smash all that into a single meeting. And the kind of output of that smurging was, we used to call it a business process review. That allowed us to, I ran a business process review. It was an 1.5-hour meeting with the Department the Aeronautics Division of the Colorado Department of Transportation. And 4 weeks later, we had a prototype of an end-to-end grants management system, right? It was like, you guys tell me what it is, like, and the answer to how to do this is implied by Salesforce. So we're just going to go build that, and then you're going to look at it and tell us if it works for you. So that really process-heavy approach I saw to be the best way to build things on Salesforce. The demo I had for Sweep was, here's a process that we created with metadata. And now you're going to make a change to the process, and we're going to change the metadata. And I was like, this is it. Like, this is the way to do it. And so, like, it broke my brain. Like, I was just like, you guys are like inside my head. This is weird. And so now I spend a good portion of my day kind of evangelizing and trying to convince people that there's a better way to do Salesforce.
So what's made your, because you have an interesting background in the, you've worked in, like you say, you've set up SIs, you've been part of founding companies, but you've also worked for some big SIs as well. So
yeah,
what's your view on all of that? I'm interested to know, because there's a lot of conversation, I think, about SIs and how good they are and how bad they are, and people having to jump in and rescue projects and
yeah.
So
well, so on that one, I think a lot of it goes back to, I'll say that the even beyond kind of owning the technical piece of sort of that, improvement and iteration loop, the best predictor of anyone's success in any project, like whether it's a technology project or whatever, like someone at the company has to, the company, right? So like the company that's doing the project, someone there has to have 100% accountability and ownership of success.
Yeah.
That is rule number one. If that happens, a good partner can enable you to get there. And ideally you go find a partner for that process or that journey who has as high a sense of ownership as you do. But like, that's rule number one for success. And I sort of get to there saying, in my career, like I've spent time at Accenture. I know the quality of work that organization is capable of doing. I have also taken over failed projects from Accenture, right? And so it's not necessarily a question of, it's not always a question of like, the SI didn't give me the right team. Sometimes it's a question of like the SI brought a team that didn't really mesh with my team. And so like, we never were able to kind of really find that partnership and like be simpatico and go forward together. And sometimes it's a question of like, we hired an SI because we wanted to have someone to blame. And I don't mean to let my tribe entirely off the hook here, right? Like there are bad SIs out there. Some SIs are better than others. But to me, the best predictor of success has always been like, is there a high degree of ownership for the outcome within the organization that's sort of trying to drive the change? Yeah. So that is sort of, I don't know, like an initial defense of system integrators. Like they come and try to help organizations do really hard things. And sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes it doesn't work out for reasons that are entirely beyond their control. Behind your initial question, I think there was sort of another one, which is like with AI and with all the things that are changing, like what's the role of SIs going forward? Yeah. In my view, the reason you hire consultants to do anything, and this is true from like if you go hire McKinsey, BCG, Bain to help you set a new strategy, or you hire Vertibo to help you implement, a really tactical Salesforce project. Yeah. You hire those people because it's really hard to change yourself. Like you hire consultants for the same reason you hire a personal trainer. Like, do you know that you should go to the gym every morning? Yeah, of course you do. You hire a personal trainer so that you have accountability to someone that isn't you to show up at the gym every day. And to like to make it easy, right? To take all of the decisions around like, well, like I could go on the treadmill or I could do squats or I could do something out. Like you show up at the gym and they tell you what to do. And that's why having a personal trainer is useful. Exact same phenomenon with consultants, especially if you're trying to change, right? You hire them because they help you make the hard decisions. They help remove some of the decisions that are sort of trivial and not really going to help you move forward. And you hire them so that you have accountability to someone that isn't you to get the work done.
How do you select that? If you're trying to select that individual, you're maybe trying to select that personal trainer, but from an SI point of view, how do you do that in your view?
I think a lot of it comes down to, and especially like in the old days, there are a lot of things you need to look at. Right? You need to look at technical capabilities, especially in sort of, I'll say the golden age of SIs, which was probably around 2015, right? It's like, do they have offshore capabilities so you can keep costs down? Like, do they have the appropriate sort of business acumen? Like, do they know your industry? Like, there's a whole bunch of things. I think especially in the age of AI where knowledge is to a certain extent commoditized, there's two things that you need to consider. One is there a good sort of interpersonal relationship? Like, do I trust this person?
Yeah.
So that, and back to the point of like, you're hiring this person because they're going to hold you accountable and they're going to give you direction, right? Like, do you trust the direction that this person is giving you so that when they say like, it's time to do squats, you don't say, well, but I don't really feel like doing squats, or are you really sure that that's the right, like the best way for me to, strengthen my core? Like, you just do it. And in order to get to that point, you have to have someone that you trust. You'll find someone that you can work with, find someone who, especially if you're looking at doing sort of big transformational things. I had a client once who, and he was a Swedish guy, so like the quote is a little bit Swedish. He's like, like to do what you do must take incredible endurance, right? Like these projects are hard. Like it's changing is difficult, and you want someone to be with you on that journey who you can have a coffee with and, chat about life and sort of enjoy the experience. So I think to me, those are, especially looking forward, like those are the features that I would look for, or the characteristics I would look for in any sort of, consulting partner, right? Do I trust this person, and do I have a sort of good enough rapport with them that I can sort of live through whatever it is we're about to go do together?
Yeah.
Third on the list is, do they know their stuff? And I put that third because, especially now, like, if you're looking at the Salesforce ecosystem, to a certain extent, it's table stakes. And the right person can cover a lot of knowledge gaps, on the longer period, like over time. Like the joke in Salesforce consulting in 2013 was like, the first thing every consultant does after a conversation with a customer is go to Google. Now it's like, there's AI tools, there's all these things that can enable and fill knowledge gaps. So like, can that person actually motivate you to go initiate and sort of follow through on change? And are you willing to spend enough time with them to let that happen?
Sure. And if we look at where sort of marketplaces now, bringing it more general, where do you see things now? You've been around a long time. You've seen different businesses, and you've seen the market evolve probably. Well, almost certainly evolve. So what would be your take on all of that, especially as things are changing so much going forwards? AgentForce and all of that stuff. But what would you say?
Maybe there's a bunch of stuff there. Maybe help me triangulate. Is there, are you talking about like from a talent perspective? Are you talking about, which platforms are like kind of help me with where to focus?
Well, take talent first, because I think that's an interesting one, and obviously personal to our business. But what would you say on that front?
So I'm going to answer this one specific to the Salesforce ecosystem, but I think it applies more broadly as well. The hot skill over the last 15 to 20 years has really been kind of technical acumen, right? Like, can you go build the thing? That was very true from a just sort of software engineering perspective. Like you look at, I heard stories about computer science majors getting paid, 350 grand out of college to go be computer science engineers. And then, the rise of the sort of trailblazer in general of like, you have these people who are all of a sudden becoming admins and like all of a sudden doubling their salaries. There's a tremendous demand for people who could go build the thing. I see that over the next 5 to 10 years, I think that's really, and I think we're seeing it now, but I think it'll continue to swing. I think that's going to shift back towards business analysts or business analysis. I think the hot skill over the next 5 to 10 years is really going to be the person who can reduce the problem to its sort of truest form, right? And that's done in an environment where you have a bunch of different stakeholders, you have evolving demands, and it's sort of sifting through interpersonal agendas and, pairing that to what's going on with the company, pairing that to what's going on in a market, pairing that to sort of what's even capable on technology, and coming up with what's the next best thing that we can do to move all that forward.
Yeah.
In the old days, we used to call that a business analyst, but I think that role is really going to evolve and end up sort of at the center of all this. I see that a lot in my work at Sweep, where part of what we do is allow someone who knows a business process to sort of hit a button and create a version of everything in Salesforce. And there's other tools on the market that are starting to come at that from different directions. So I think, to answer maybe a question adjacent to what you asked, like if I were starting my career today, like what would I look to sort of what skills would I look to develop and market? It really is those sort of business analysis skills, like understand a business process, understand where the constraints are, understand what the problems are, understand where you can add efficiency and leverage, and be able to articulate that back to a room full of people who maybe all wants to do it a slightly different way. Get them to agree to a version 1 and get them to go try it for 6 weeks and then come back and do that again.
Yeah, which is interesting because Salesforce BAs typically, they wouldn't be the first people on everyone's page, would they? Because they're not the solution. They're not the solution necessarily. They do assist in the solutions, but they're not the mind, the great mind that can know everything and do everything. And I suppose that's the transition, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and I think some of it is a we'll say sort of unintended consequence of Trailhead, right? Trailhead trains people how to build things on Salesforce. It does not necessarily train people to think critically about what is the right thing to build on Salesforce. And that makes perfect sense if you're Salesforce and you're building Trailhead and you are looking at the skill gap of we don't have enough people in the world that can turn thoughts into Salesforce reality. But I also think that that's a good case in point of the state of the ecosystem in general. Like you have a lot of people who have spent a lot of money building things on Salesforce and are realizing that they're not using a lot of what they built, and that their orgs are overbuilt, and that they wish they could, reduce technical debt or reduce complexity or kind of whatever you want to, however you want to describe it.
Yeah.
And so I think there's sort of a bill coming due around, like, we probably did too much building and not enough analyzing. And especially with things like AgentForce, where it's like, we can, depending on how much you believe the marketing, like, we can instantly automate any process with this agent as long as we know what process we need to automate. Right.
Yeah.
And like, that's the rub. And I think that's the rub for most people as you look at kind of how to deploy technology in business over the next 10 years.
Do you think, I mean, I was at Dreamforce in September, and AgentForce was every other word. So do you think, what's your perception on that? Because it seemed to be bring different opinions, but both good and some, good, not bad, but different.
I'm going to give you, I grew up in New England, so I have sort of deep cynical roots. But I've been living in the Western United States for a really long time. So like, the optimist in me is started to flourish. I'll give you the sort of West Coast version, or Western version on the whole thing. I think Salesforce needed a pivot. I think they had gone down the sort of app proliferation road for a number of years, and I think it was becoming pretty clear in the market that everybody was kind of fed up with that. Like, no one wants to buy another cloud. No one wants to have to pay more to unlock the feature that they thought they were getting originally. So I think from a market perspective, Salesforce really needed a pivot, and I think AI provided a good pivot point, and I think they timed it right.
Yeah.
I think the overall architecture of AgentForce is really interesting, and I think it is. I think it's doing some things the quote unquote the right way, right? Like, you write or you build a flow. The flow is the sort of technical automation of a process, and then you open up a menu of those to this thing in the middle called an agent that can call on those at the appropriate time and can have some degree of judgment around which is the right one to call. That's a really powerful story, and for organizations that are fortunate enough to have done really good homework over the last 5 to 10 years and have really sort of built out their Salesforce orgs with a high degree of discipline, I think it's going to unlock a lot of doors. I think there's a ton of potential there. There's a whole bunch of caveats to that, but like, that is all of that stuff I think is fundamentally true, right? Like, there's huge potential for organizations that are sort of on the high end of the adoption curve and on the high end of sort of the competency curve. I think they're going to move very quickly through this process. It is a new technology. I think there's a bunch of things that remain to be proven, and I think there's a bunch of market factors that are going to that could slow that down in terms of proving that out and really gaining momentum. And some of that is, I think, Salesforce customers are frustrated with Salesforce. The really cynical side of the Salesforce ecosystem is sitting and looking at this like, yeah, I've seen this all before. Like, you know what? Like, I don't want to go through this with Salesforce again, because like, it's been too much. So like, some of them are exploring other paths. But I don't think any of that is necessarily a reflection on the potential of AgentForce. And like, frankly, like, from everything that we've seen technically, like, it's not 100% there, but it's like 80% there, and it's not there. Anyway, a whole bunch of themes there. Let me know if I need to circle back on any of those.
No, that's all good. I've got one final question then for you, because I get some people tell me, well, Salesforce, in 5 years will be half the size what it is now. It's you're a vet of this space. What's your view?
I think that's sort of like saying in 2007 that Oracle would be half the size that it was then in 5 years. It's an easy, like it's very easy to look at sort of a new trend coming out and being like, oh, there's just no way. I think that sort of doomsaying, one, I understand where people are coming from with that. I think it comes from a couple of different places. One, I do think the sort of seat-based SaaS model is under stress. And that people recognize that sort of over a decade, like that, you know, that $125 or whatever you end up paying per user per month is expensive. And so I think that there's going to be some recalibration there. But I don't see, knowing that, you know, I've spent my career helping companies small and large change. The consulting industry exists because people hate doing that. Like, you need to hire someone else to push you over the edge. That's the only way it works. That's why there are consulting companies. Knowing that, like, I just look at what Salesforce has and like the way their business is based on subscription. Like, I just refuse to believe that half of their customers rip out Salesforce, because that's a really big move, and the platform is not without value. So, you know, the kind of market dynamic, platform dynamic, technology dynamic, like, I think that's one thing that leads people to say that. I think the thing that drives the momentum behind that opinion a little bit more is back to, like, people are really frustrated by Salesforce right now. They're sort of not in a good way in terms of public relations. I think that started kind of in earnest in what would have been 2022. Like, that started with the big layoffs, and like that was the end of the Ohana period as we know it. And that has bled through the ecosystem, and people have a bad taste in their mouth, right? It's like a lot of their employees got wronged, a lot of their customers got wronged, and that, you know, just like constant, you know, reshuffle of teams. And like, you know, I used to get customer success for free, and now you're telling me I have to pay for it. And like, oh, like I had this feature that I really liked or wanted, and like now you're telling me I got to pay for that too. So I think there's some ill will built up. Some of that I think was inevitable. Like, no vendor can be the favorite child forever.
No.
But I think you have to separate that sentiment, which to a certain extent is warranted, from the market reality that, like, Salesforce is a big technology company. They are an incumbent now, and thinking that they're just going to sort of disappear overnight, I think is missing the plot a little bit.
Cool. That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Colby. I appreciate it. That was enlightening. I think you. I mean that was good to, you know, because you've just been around and you know what's what, and you've worked for different companies, small or big. You founded companies. That's exactly the sort of take I wanted to get. So you've obviously done millions of these before.
I am a consultant. I talk for a living. So, you know, it's. I used to joke that you get 3 consultants in a room and you have at least 14 opinions. And so I come with opinions prepared. Matt, I really appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the conversation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's all right. Thanks a lot, Colby. Speak soon.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.